If you read Frank Herbert's Dune before seeing the movie, you spent the entire first act waiting for a scene that never comes. In the novel, a forged note frames Lady Jessica as a Harkonnen traitor, and Duke Leto has to feign suspicion of the woman he loves while he hunts the real spy. Denis Villeneuve cut that whole paranoid subplot, and that single decision is the key to everything his adaptation does. To get Dune onto the screen, he stripped out the book's plans within plans and turned its dense interior politics into something you could actually watch. Here is what survived, what he cut, and what those choices cost. Start with what he gets right, because it is why the rest earns your trust. The Gom Jabbar test is intact. The poisoned needle at Paul's throat, the box that floods him with pain that is not real, every beat of that suffocating tension. The hunter-seeker creeping through Paul's room plays exactly as written. Yueh's betrayal, the captured Duke, and Leto's final act of biting down on the poisoned tooth all unfold beat for beat. Even Paul's duel with Jameis keeps its grim, fatalistic weight. Villeneuve treats these pillars as sacred, and that fidelity buys him the freedom to rebuild everything else. So let's talk about what he rebuilt, starting with that missing traitor plot. In the book, the entire first half runs on suspicion. The forged note, Leto pretending to distrust Jessica, a spy hunt crawling through his own house. It is gripping on the page, but it is almost all internal. Characters thinking and doubting and calculating. The film cuts it completely and replaces it with a quiet, invented scene in a graveyard on Caladan, where Leto simply tells Paul that he is loved as a son, not as an heir. We trade a web of counter-espionage for one clean moment of tenderness. It is a warmer, more cinematic goodbye, but it costs Leto the lonely paranoia that makes his fall so tragic in the novel. The single biggest casualty is the Arrakeen dinner party. It is the densest political scene in the book's first half. Leto abolishes the old water hoarding custom to win the locals, Paul goads a guild banker into tipping his hand, and Kynes quietly reveals just how much power he holds over the planet. It is the one moment the Atreides feel like master politicians working a room full of vipers. Villeneuve cut all of it, because a dinner party stalls a blockbuster, and with it went the film's best chance to show power as something other than firepower. He also drained out the book's ecological heart. Gone is the Fremen dream of terraforming Arrakis into a green world, the secret spice bribes that blind the guild satellites, and Yueh's grim arithmetic that one palm tree drinks the daily water of 5 men. In the novel, water is not set dressing, it is the engine behind every custom, every betrayal, every prayer. On screen, scarcity becomes a gorgeous visual mood instead of a desperate argument. The planet looks magnificent, but it loses the thirsty, obsessive soul that made Herbert's world feel alive. Dr. Yueh takes the quietest hit of all. The book lives inside his head. His anguish, his warmth with Paul, the gift of the Orange Catholic Bible, the unbreakable conditioning he has to override just to betray the family. The film keeps the betrayal and discards the man. Without that interior life, his treachery lands as a plot device, the guy who opens the door, instead of the heartbreak it is supposed to be. The Harkonnen side gets flattened into a blunter threat. In the novel, the Baron is a patient schemer who installs his brute nephew Rabban to crush Arrakis precisely so his golden boy Feyd-Rautha can arrive later and be welcomed as a savior. It is manipulation played across generations. Feyd is absent from this half entirely, held back for part 2, so the Baron's grand design shrinks to a single order: squeeze the planet dry. The villain loses his cunning and picks up a sledgehammer. Not every change is a loss. Some are upgrades, and Liet Kynes is the clearest. The novel's Kynes is a male imperial planetologist who dies slowly and alone in the deep desert, hallucinating his father's ecology lectures as the sand swallows him. Villeneuve recasts the role as a fierce, commanding woman and gives her a death built for the screen. Stabbed by the Emperor's Sardaukar, she uses her last breath to summon a colossal sandworm that devours her and her killers in one swallow. It trades the book's slow environmental irony for blood and spectacle, and honestly, it is the better exit. Paul's escape from the Harkonnens gets a similar makeover. In the book, Jessica engineers their getaway by weaponizing the guards' lust, and Paul strikes in the resulting chaos. The film scrubs the manipulation and rebuilds the moment around Paul's first real use of the voice. In the dim green light of the downthopter, he hunts for the right commanding tone and forces a guard to free his mother. It is a clean superhero origin beat. It loses the dirty desperation of two prisoners fighting to survive, but it makes Paul's power land like a switch flipping on. Villeneuve also rearranges the furniture, and the Gom Jabbar is the biggest piece he moves. The novel opens cold on that test. The film opens instead on Chani narrating Fremen life under Harkonnen occupation as the harvesters scour the desert, and saves the box test for the eve of the family's departure. It is a smart swap. The book begins with one private psychological trial, while the movie begins with an entire oppressed planet. He turns dry appendix backstory into the very first thing you feel. One omission is easy to miss, but it cuts deep. In the book, Paul's spice-soaked awakening in the still tent hands him a horrifying truth. He and Jessica carry the Baron Harkonnen's own blood, and the monster destroying them is family. The film keeps the vision locked on Paul's Holy War future and drops the Bloodline twist entirely. The sequence still feels faithful to its terror, but it trades Paul's most personal horror for a cleaner, grander prophecy. A lot of the book's first half was not cut so much as postponed. Jessica drinking the water of life and Aaliyah's eerie awakening in the womb, Gurney Halleck's years hiding among the smugglers, Thufir Hawat's capture, and the funeral that reclaims the water hidden in a dead man's flesh are all pushed into part 2. It is ruthless triage, and it is the right call. It keeps the runtime from buckling, even if it leaves part 1 feeling less like a finished story and more like a held breath. Then there are the small tells, the changes that never make headlines but quietly reshape the film. Gurney's shield sparring lesson moves from Arrakis back home to Caladan, so the action starts before the Atreides ever leave. The Baron recovers from the poison gas in a grotesque invented bath of black oil. Hawat's dry classroom briefing on the planet becomes Paul, alone with a glowing film book. Shoutout Mapes loses her role in the Hunter-Seeker attack, the Reverend Mother's scolding of Jessica shrinks to one venomous glance, and Duncan Idaho gets an invented last stand fighting his way out of the burning palace so his sacrifice feels earned. There is even a new shot of the Atreides' arrival framed through a targeting scope, just to make you feel watched. Which of these small cuts deserved a whole chapter, and which big change do you think is overrated? Tell me in the comments. So here's the trade Villeneuve made. He burned the book's political and ecological textbook to build something overwhelming, sheer scale, dread, and awe. The terror of the Bene Gesserit and the crushing weight of Arrakis survive perfectly. The thirsty, scheming soul of the novel mostly does not. Neither version cancels out the other. The book builds a living world you can get lost studying, and the film engineers a flawless nightmare you cannot look away from. When you stand at the edge of that desert, do you want to do the brutal math of water and power, or do you just want to hear the thumper call the worm? If you want to know which version tells the story better, subscribe. We break down a new book versus movie every week. And drop a comment. Which change from Dune hurt the most, and which one actually made it better?